My greatest discovery in life was not how to pick stocks. It was not how to read financial statements. It was realizing one brutal truth: almost 99% of companies eventually die. The star businesses you see today will most likely be gone in 20 years. IBM dominated for 60 years, and even it was pushed aside by the next technological wave. Kodak invented the digital camera, yet it was destroyed by digital photography itself. But there are 5 industries that are as certain as the sun rising every morning. They existed 20 years ago. They exist today, and they will still exist 20 years from now. Not only that, they will likely become even more valuable. When I was 14 years old, I worked at the Buffett family grocery store in Omaha. The owner was Warren Buffett's grandfather, Ernest Buffett, a stern old German man. He made us work 12 hours a day, no meal break, no rest, just $2 in wages. One day, a customer came in. His name was Tom. He was in his 50s, dressed in a decent suit, and drove a Ford. He owned another grocery store in town. I watched him stand in front of the shelves for a long time, staring at the price tags. In the end, he bought only 1 bag of flour and left. Ernest watched him walk away and said to me, "He's finished." I did not understand. I asked why. "He looks like he's doing fine." Ernest said, "Look at what he bought. He bought flour." He was comparing prices. If a grocery store owner has to come here to compare flour prices, it means his store is already dying. Sure enough, 2 months later, Tom's store shut down. Why? Because across the street from his shop, a chain supermarket had opened. Its prices were 10% lower. Its selection was twice as large, and it had parking. Tom tried cutting prices to keep his customers, but his own costs were too high. If he lowered prices, he lost money. If he did not, customers disappeared. The last time I saw him was at the bakery on the corner. His hair had gone completely white. His shoulders had collapsed. His eyes were empty. He said to me, "Charlie, I spent 30 years in the grocery business. I thought I understood it. What I did not understand was that this business had no moat at all. Anyone can open a grocery store. Anyone can undercut me. I did not lose to a competitor. I lost to the nature of the industry itself." I was only 14, but I remembered one thing for the rest of my life. A business without a moat is running naked. You make money today, and tomorrow someone takes it from you. That is why Warren and I never liked businesses in perfectly competitive industries. Grocery stores, restaurants, clothing shops, small factories, they look simple. In reality, they are some of the hardest businesses in the world. The barriers are too low, the competition is too intense, the moat is zero. I had a friend, let's call him Thomas. He was an insurance actuary. In the 1970s, he joined an insurance company called Geico. At the time, Wall Street analysts looked down on insurance. They thought it was a low-growth, boring industry. Thomas's classmates all went to glamorous companies like IBM and General Electric. They laughed at him. "So this is your life now, sitting in an insurance company, counting money and calculating probabilities." But Thomas stayed. His salary was not high. Still, every year the company gave him some stock options. He never sold them. He simply held on. 40 years passed. The last time I saw Thomas was in 2010. He was retired, living in a beach house in California. He drove an ordinary Honda. He wore old shirts and jeans. He did not look rich at all. He said to me, "Charlie, I only did one thing right in my life. I stayed with a company that had float." What is float? It is when customers pay you premiums now and you pay claims later. That time gap can be invested. Geico had tens of billions of dollars in float every year, and the little bit of stock Thomas owned had gone up hundreds of times over 40 years. He said, "Those classmates of mine who went to IBM, their companies are shadows of what they used to be. The people who chased hot trends. One bubble burst, and it all vanished. But insurance will always be needed, as long as people are alive." I looked at him and knew exactly what had happened. He did not win because of luck. He won because he chose the right industry, an industry with a moat. The first timeless industry is insurance. Human fear of uncertainty never goes away. Let me tell you what a truly great business is. It is not defined by how high the margins are. It is not defined by how fast it grows. It comes down to one word: necessary. Insurance is exactly that kind of business. As long as people live, there will be risk, and where there is risk, there will be insurance. That sounds simple, but almost 99% of investors misunderstand this simple truth. They think insurance companies make money by collecting premiums and paying out less in claims. Wrong. The really intelligent insurance companies make money through float. What does that mean? You buy a life insurance policy today and pay $100,000 in premiums, but you are not using that money today. Maybe it will not be needed for 30 years. For those 30 years, that $100,000 sits in the hands of the insurance company. They invest it, they buy stocks, they buy bonds. Even if they eventually pay out the full amount, the investment returns in between can be enormous. Berkshire Hathaway's insurance operations have given us more than $160 billion of float. That is like someone handing us $160 billion to invest for free. Where else do you find a business like that? People say insurance is highly competitive and low margin. That is true. But that is usually because most insurance managers are fools. They cut prices recklessly to grab market share. Then they discover the premiums they collected are not even enough to cover claims. What do smart insurers do? They would rather do less business and stay profitable. That is exactly what Geico did. It focused on lower-risk customers and avoided the worst policies. Its market share may have looked smaller, but every policy made money. More importantly, every premium became float. That is a moat, and it is very hard to copy because most people lack the discipline. 20 years from now, insurance will still be here, because human fear of death, disease, and accidents will never disappear. And as society becomes wealthier, people will buy even more insurance. That is not a prediction. That is human nature. In 1972, Warren and I became interested in a candy company called See's Candies. It was the largest boxed chocolate maker in California. The company generated $30 million in annual revenue and $4 million in profit, but the seller wanted $25 million. Warren thought it was too expensive, he said. Charlie, the book value is only $8 million. Why would we pay $25? I told him. Warren, some things never show up on the balance sheet. Go to California on Valentine's Day. Imagine a man handing his girlfriend a box of chocolates with no brand name and saying, "Honey, I bought the cheapest one." What do you think happens next? Warren laughed. He understood. We bought See's Candies, and then we discovered something remarkable. We could raise prices by 10% a year, and nobody cared, because customers were not buying candy. They were buying certainty. Certainty meant that when you handed someone that familiar black and white box, their face would light up. That kind of certainty is priceless. More than 50 years have passed since 1972. See's did not build factories all over the country. It did not become a national empire, but it made us many, many times our original investment. Once, an MBA student asked me, "Mr. Munger, why didn't See's expand across the whole United States? Why not open chains everywhere? Why not cut prices and capture more market share?" I said, "Young man, do you know what a moat is? A moat means that when you have pricing power, you protect it. See's had a moat in California and on the West Coast. But if we had gone to New York, people there might not even have known what See's was. Why would we go fight a war in a place where we had no moat?" That is the problem with many entrepreneurs. They treat growth as the goal. It is not. Profitability is the goal. See's taught me one of the greatest lessons in business. A brand, especially a brand with pricing power, is one of the best assets in the world. The second timeless industry is branded consumer goods. What is a brand? Most people think it means awareness or advertising. Wrong. At its core, a brand gives the customer an information advantage. When you see Coca-Cola, you do not need to read the ingredients. You do not need to do a market survey. You do not need to ask your friends. You already know what it will taste like. That is information advantage. It allows people to decide without thinking, and decisions made without friction are among the most valuable decisions of all. When we studied Coca-Cola's history, which stretched back more than a century, we found something astonishing. The company did not succeed because of the formula. It succeeded because it occupied a permanent place in the customer's mind. That place was called happiness. Every day around the world, people consume billions of servings of Coca-Cola. They are not just drinking because they are thirsty. They are drinking an emotion wrapped in a red can. How much is that worth? In 1988, we started buying Coca-Cola stock. At the time, it traded at about 15 times earnings. Many people said it was too expensive, but we were not looking at the price-to-earnings ratio. We were looking at a different question. If I gave you $100 billion, could you build a brand strong enough to defeat Coca-Cola? The answer is no. Consumers around the world have already accepted Coca-Cola. That level of recognition was built over more than 100 years. You cannot buy that no matter how much money you spend. That is a moat. Warren once said something I have always loved: if you gave me $100 billion and told me to take away Coca-Cola's leadership, I would not know where to begin. That is the power of brand. 20 years from now, Coca-Cola will still be here, because the human desire for certainty never disappears, and brand is one of the purest forms of certainty. I once knew an engineer. Let's call him Hans. Hans worked his whole life at a tool company in Munich called Bosch. In the 1980s, cheap tools from Japan and China flooded the European market. They sold for half the price of Bosch. Many of Hans's colleagues panicked. They thought the company was finished. Hans did not. He said, "We do not sell tools, we sell reliability. If a construction worker is drilling on a rooftop and the drill suddenly fails, he could fall. Is he really going to risk that to save $50? Hans was right. Bosch's market share did not fall. In fact, it rose. Why? Because professional users do not care most about price. They care about whether the tool will fail at the worst possible moment. That is the power of brand. The last time I saw Hans was in 2015. He was retired, living comfortably off a pension and stock income. He told me, "Charlie, the classmates who chased high-tech excitement, some of their companies disappeared. Some were bought out, but Bosch is still here and stronger than ever." Then he told me something else. Bosch's brand loyalty in Europe was above 90%. That meant people who had used Bosch once would buy Bosch again. That kind of loyalty is invaluable. The third timeless industry is essential infrastructure. Let me ask you something. Would you install 2 separate power grids in the same house? Would you build 2 railway networks through the same city? Of course not. That is what a natural monopoly looks like. A natural monopoly exists when the upfront investment is so large that competition becomes almost impossible. In 2010, we bought BNSF Railway for $44 billion. It was the largest acquisition in Berkshire Hathaway's history. Many analysts thought we were crazy. Railroads. That is a 19th century business. The future is drones and self-driving vehicles. Warren and I simply smiled. Let me tell you why railroads never go out of date. First, if you wanted to build a comparable network from scratch, it might cost $100 billion and take 100 years. Who is going to do that? Nobody. Second, rail is one of the most energy-efficient forms of land transport in the world. A single train can move the same freight as hundreds of trucks, using far less energy. As long as energy has a cost, rail has value. Third, BNSF connects huge portions of the western United States. If companies want to move goods across that network, they have to use our rails. Not because our service is perfect, because there is often no practical alternative. That is a moat, and it is one of the strongest kinds. People say technology changes everything. Yes, it does. But it does not change the logic of infrastructure. 20 years from now, goods will still need to move from point A to point B. People will still need electricity. They will still need water. They will still need water. They will still need natural gas. And the companies that own those networks do not just own assets, they own cash machines. As long as society keeps functioning, they keep earning. Now let me talk about something people do not like to talk about. Time. I am almost 100 years old. People often ask me, if you could start over, what would you change? My answer disappoints them. I would not change much, because the most important lesson I ever learned was not how to make money. It was how to become a friend of time. There are 2 kinds of businesses in this world. The first kind forces you to run non-stop just to stay in place. The second kind quietly becomes more valuable while you sit still. Most technology companies belong to the first category. The 5 industries I am talking about belong to the second. Why? Because of the moat. A real moat does not need daily maintenance. It just sits there like the Grand Canyon. Time is not its enemy. Time is its ally. The longer time passes, the deeper the moat becomes. Coca-Cola does not wake up every morning wondering if people still know who it is. Its brand has been planted in the consumer mind for over a century. BNSF does not lie awake worrying that someone will build a brand new competing railway network. The cost and time required make that nearly impossible. Insurance companies do not have to invent a new human fear every year. The fear of risk has existed since the beginning of humanity. That is why Warren and I were able to sit still and still become wealthy. We were not lazy. We simply understood the power of time. The people who chase every hot trend are not investing. They are gambling. And the problem with gambling is that time is your enemy. With every bet, you can lose everything. But when you find a business with a real moat, time becomes your greatest friend. It works for you quietly, like compounding in the background. I have seen too many people who were rich at 40 because they caught the right wave, and broke at 60 because the wave ended. Real wealth is not fast money. Real wealth is owning assets that are still growing in value 20 years later. The fourth timeless industry is utilities. Here is a truth that sounds strange but happens to be real. Competition is not always good. For shareholders, monopoly is often better. That may sound politically incorrect, but it is true. Utilities prove it. Berkshire Hathaway Energy grew from a relatively modest profit base when we invested to billions in earnings over time. Why? Because it operates in a monopoly structure. If you live in Iowa, there is usually only one electric company serving your home. You may dislike it, but can you simply choose not to use it? No, that is a moat. And what makes it even better is this: utilities are regulated monopolies. The government allows you to dominate a service area, but it also limits your returns. At first, that sounds bad. It is not. It is one of the greatest advantages imaginable, because regulation protects you from competition. As long as you provide stable service and continue investing in infrastructure, regulators generally allow you a fair return, and fair in investing is often wonderful. Why? Because certainty is one of the rarest things in the world. Many people misunderstand this. They think high-margin technology businesses are the best businesses. Not necessarily. High margins attract competitors. If you earn 50% gross margins today, tomorrow 10 new rivals show up to take your market. Utilities are different. Their returns are capped. Nobody gets too jealous, and nobody can easily enter. 20 years from now, people will still need electricity and natural gas. And as economies grow, demand usually rises with them. Owning those networks is like owning a toll booth. Every time someone passes through, you collect forever. Now let me tell you about Costco. In 1997, I joined Costco's board. At the time, Walmart was the giant of retail, and everyone was trying to copy it. But Costco was different. Its founder, Jim Sinegal, had one stubborn rule: our markup will never exceed 14%. Think about that. Traditional supermarkets often run markups of 25% to 30%. Department stores may go as high as 40% or 50%, but Jim insisted that no item should be marked up by more than 14%. If a supplier's price did not allow Costco to stay within that limit, Costco simply would not sell the item. Wall Street analysts thought they were crazy. Why not make more? Customers do not know your cost structure. Raise prices by 20%. They will still buy, but Jim said, "We are not trying to maximize this year's profit. We are trying to earn a lifetime of trust." That is one of the smartest things I have ever heard in business. Costco is a membership model. You pay an annual fee before you even enter the store, and that model created a miracle. Renewal rates stayed above 90%. That means once people became Costco members, they almost never left. Why? Because they knew they would not be cheated there. That trust became the moat. I once knew a member who moved to another state after retirement. There was no Costco nearby, so he drove 2 hours to shop at the nearest one. That is brand loyalty. That is a moat, and the price of building that moat was giving up a little short-term profit. The fifth timeless industry is membership retail. Costco taught me something important. The deepest moat is not the product. It is not even the price. It is trust. What is trust? Trust means the customer does not need to compare, does not need to research, does not need to worry. They buy with confidence because they believe you will not exploit them. That is more powerful than any advertisement. Costco earns billions of dollars a year from membership fees alone. That money arrives before it even sells the merchandise. Then it sells the goods at extremely low margins. And that is exactly why people renew. It creates a beautiful cycle. Low prices create trust. Trust drives renewals. Renewals increase membership. More members increase purchasing power. Greater purchasing power lowers cost. Lower cost supports even lower prices. Once that cycle is established, it becomes very difficult to break. Walmart tried, Sam's Club tried, others tried. But Costco remained Costco because it had something rare: discipline. Most companies always want to earn a little more, then a little more after that, and little by little the customer's trust begins to erode. 20 years from now, people will still need everyday goods, and they will choose the place they believe will never take advantage of them. That place is Costco. Now, let me say something about death and legacy. I am nearly 100. People ask me, are you afraid of death? No, because I know I am not leaving behind only money. I am leaving behind a way of thinking, and that way of thinking is simple. Find businesses with moats and then sit still. Simple does not mean easy. Almost 90% of people never learn this. Why? Because of human nature. Human beings love excitement. They love instant rewards. They love the feeling of buying today and doubling tomorrow. But that is not how real wealth is built. Real wealth is compounding. Real wealth is time working quietly for the right assets. Real wealth is owning something that is still earning 20 years from now. What I am proudest of is not how much money Warren and I made. It is that we proved something. Ordinary people can achieve extraordinary success if they understand a few basic principles. What are those principles? First, find the moat. Second, wait. Third, repeat the first and second steps. That is it. But again, simple is not easy. Waiting is one of the hardest things in the world. I have seen plenty of brilliant people who understood everything except how to sit still, so they stayed busy their whole lives, yet never became truly wealthy. And then there were other people who looked less brilliant, but they understood a few industries deeply and held on for dear life. Those people became billionaires. That is what I want to leave behind. Not a secret, common sense. And common sense is the rarest thing of all. So let me say this clearly. The next 20 years will not be defined by 5 timeless industries alone. They will be defined by 5 timeless principles. First, monopoly beats competition. Industries with natural monopoly characteristics, insurance float, infrastructure networks, and regulatory protection do not require you to fight every day. Time itself becomes your moat. Second, brand and trust matter more than fame. A valuable brand is not just well known, it gives the customer certainty. When customers choose you without hesitation, you have pricing power, and pricing power is the foundation of long-term profitability. Third, necessary beats exciting. Do not chase businesses that promise to change the world. Chase the businesses the world cannot live without. Fourth, simple beats complex. Warren and I never invested in things we did not understand. Not because we were timid, because we were honest. And the truth is, many complex things have very shallow moats. Fifth, patience beats brilliance. The world has no shortage of smart people. What it lacks is patient smart people. The people who make the biggest fortunes are rarely the most dazzling. They are the ones who can wait. May you find your own moat. May you learn how to wait. May you one day sit in a rocking chair, watching your assets quietly grow, instead of still chasing the next hot trend. That is real wealth. That is real freedom. May your reason endure, and may your heart remain at peace.